Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Ashala here and Sue Grockmal, my dear friend and moderator. We're so delighted to be sharing with you at this very powerful time of the year, very powerful time in terms of what's unfolding for all of us as a collective. Sue and I always have this little preamble before our interview, before our chat and questions. And we always notice that seem to be common, I want to say, challenges or focuses in our communities. People are talking about similar things. So we're going to get into some of that today as well. But we'll start off with audience questions because we got a couple of people that jumped on early with their questions. Thank you for that. Sue, do you want to start by...
Yep. So Suzanne Price came in early here. She said, "Good morning. I'm wondering what the best education path is for my 11-year-old son, currently in the public school, and it is a struggle. Generally, how and when will the education system for kids change?"
Advice from spirit guides. Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you, Sue.
Welcome.
These are such relevant questions for so many of us.
Absolutely. So many people pulling their kids out of school. They have the ability to do so. Some people not sure, just trying to navigate within the system. So really, really good question.
Okay, let's have a look and see what Spirit wants to say about this right at this moment. Oh, interesting. Okay. Isn't this curious? This is the Two of Cups, which is a lot about relationships. It's a lot about harmony through emotional connection. So that's showing up as us. Let's see where we go with that, what the message is from Spirit. Ooh, interesting. Okay, this does actually jump into one of my sessions this week. We had quite a big process about, being involved in academia. This person was actually going for either their master's, PhD thesis in spiritual psychology. And they were really struggling with like how academia basically compartmentalizes everything and removes it. It abstracts it to the point where there's no more relevance, especially in the world we're coming into where we want to be more connected emotionally. Like, basically the guides are saying here, like, really some of the most important education is relational. It's about how do we, communicate with you. Communication skills, relationship skills are what we want to be focusing on for youth and children as a primary focus, right? And then also real world stuff that is actually about, how to interact with the real world, not just the academic abstract world. So are we birthing a whole generation of, tech, right? Like people that work in a virtual reality or are in big institutions or sales and marketing and all these careers that have been highly regarded over the last few decades. It's like, well, first of all, they're moving towards obsolescence because of AI. And secondly, there's such a need for people to be in careers that are more of the real world. Like I always think about just basic, the trades, obviously, and even more obscure things like, I don't know, working with food, working with agriculture. Some of these careers or life purposes or callings, you're not going to get taught that in the education system that we're in right now. So it's almost like we're going back to more of a sort of apprenticeship, teaching youth skills about how to think critically, how to have confidence, how to work in relationship with other people. What are your feelings about that, Sue?
Well, absolutely. So as a sign language interpreter for 35 years, that's what we would hear in post-secondary is that, we're not seeing the social skills we used to. We're not seeing the mind math we used to. We're not seeing young people with the ability to work in teams. And so when they ask industry, well, what do you need? They're like, We need people with communication skills and people skills.
And real world skills,
Some
like the
hands-on
butcher, the
skills.
baker, the candlestick maker of
Yes.
old, right?
Well,
It's like,
yes, and what have we come out of after high school? So basically, we have no skills. Coming out of high school, we can maybe write an essay, but we can't apply anything. And so when you look at the school system, it just lends itself to feeding the university systems. So not to take away from people who, have education, but the practical skills. And then not only that, you can get into the debt, you can get into all those sorts of things. Working at the hospital, and there was a lady who got mentored in like 40 years ago on the radiation machine. And she's like, yeah, they paid us, they taught us what to do, the hospital mentored us in. And then there was the guy who just spent $100,000 in school. He's still paying it off. And he's like, you got to be kidding me. We're both doing the same jobs and they were paying you and I have to pay and owe.
yeah.
And
So this is
paradigm, right?
And I want to say that this is actually, there's quite a good news story here. This is not doom and gloom, folks. It is a call to action, a call to respond in a new way that might be a little akin to an old way. A new old way is what they're saying. And interesting, what I'm being shown here, first of all, relational building apprenticeship style career. This is for Suzanne's son in particular, that there may be someone that, like, you may want to, over the next 2 or 3 years, strategize to move away from certain types of academic focus temporarily into some kind of apprenticeship, for example.
I love it.
Then, if your son wants to later on go into studying something academically with critical thought for his own interest, developing entrepreneurial skills, it looks like he has an ability. And a lot of these kids coming in, they're basically going to be designing their own businesses, their own careers. So anything with mentorship, anything with apprenticeship, the less through the system, the better, because as we know, that system is just literally peppered with all kinds of propaganda and brainwashing and you name it, right? So, and I'm also being shown that what we build over the next 2 or 3 years, thinking it's just a strategy with our little community and a few kids and a few families to create some kind of homeschooling group or some kind of apprenticeship programs or whatever, we could think we're just thinking small and addressing our own personal thing, but these are going to turn into the schools of the future.
I love it, because what I hear is sovereignty too. So you're taking back your sovereignty and learning some of the trades that are almost gone, whether you're like you say, like a butcher, baker, shoemaker, it doesn't actually matter. So just getting those practical skills nailed down in a generation of kids that don't have them anymore.
That's right. And there's no time. Also, we're shifting. We have the power to move the priority. Like, basically we've been trained to see certain kind of professional careers and careers focused in, basically corporate careers. We were trained. We cut our teeth on that. That's how we were trained. That's the goal. Those are the ultimate careers. And they are, not only are they breeding grounds for greed and, power dominance agendas and corruption, they're not really very fulfilling either. Like people sitting behind a desk for their entire 40 years of their career, right? It's like, so even though we kind of have looked down our noses at more, sort of real world skills, like
blue collar.
Well, not even blue collar, because blue collar is a lot of times about extraction industry.
Oh, I see. Yep.
So I'm talking about what we would almost refer to more as cottage industry, craft industry or something like that. And it's like, it's been relegated to almost total insignificance. And yet, I always like to say something like I'm not promoting drinking of alcohol, but the craft brewing industry that's risen up in the last decade, I think is a huge success story. because it shows how all these little small mom and pop operations, or just, like somebody that had an idea and they started playing around and making, brewing beer, maybe at home or something. Next thing you know, they're getting a little bigger. And now we've got all these small microbreweries everywhere, and it's taking down the big corporate ones.
Yes.
So we can do that in so many areas.
I just met somebody. He was a chef. He was making really good money in a resort, and he started making his own barbecue sauce. So they've created this whole line. And over the last 3 years, it's been a family business where the kids are selling the barbecue sauce. And it was the little boy's idea, and they went with it. They moved to a small town, like a little place, and they are so busy
and happy and involved and self-employed, mentoring their family into the business. This is what we used to love, right? You'd go to whatever it was, a small business, a small family-run business.
Yep.
And we would all love to hear the story of this went through the generations and it was passed along. And we often, we could say, well, that family was in business for 4 generations because they offered a good service or they offered a good product. So we're going to go back to more of that smaller, quality, entrepreneurial, mentorship and apprenticeship type of education model. And it's really up here. We start up here by saying, you know what, we're not going to train our kids to have corporate, virtual jobs, right? Jobs in tech. We're not going to train them that's the big goal.
Where we can be creative.
Yeah.
And we can be creators because we're either consumers or creators. And
either. Totally. And I'm also hearing that, people might get a little anxious and say, yeah, but my child is so intelligent and I want them to be challenged intellectually. And it's like, who says that somebody that works in that kind of business can't be phenomenally intelligent, well, self-educated with what they're actually interested in, learning from source material that isn't littered with propaganda and brainwashing. So in
a fraction of the time.
Totally.
A fraction of the time, right? So the path for her son, should he stay in the education system for now, or should he?
Well, it feels like she's starting with the idea of focusing on making that transition off the system. Like, one of the things I can see that's really hard for parents is that a lot of them are still working in the system. So they need childcare for their kids, or they need something for their kids to do. They can't be at home with them. 100%. So we're going to need to get a little creative over the next 3 or 4 years and start to create these little, that's why homeschooling groups happen, because it's like you got 5 families, there's 5 days of the week. One family takes responsibility of one day, and then you've got basically childcare covered all 5 days.
Yeah. Yep.
So
making it work, connecting,
and it's not necessarily easy because it's not handed to us, but we have full control. That's the trade-off.
Yeah. Yes, and it's like, believe me, I don't want to teach the kids math. Someone else has to teach them math. It has to be somebody else. And so,
but then if you actually hire a tutor with who has, the same values as you.
Yes.
Like if you're Christian families and you hire a Christian tutor for your children or whatever, right? Like, and if you get together in a group of you and hire a tutor, it's so reasonable.
Yes, absolutely. So, absolutely. So I would like to want to go into the next question.
Sure, totally.
All right, so we got Christian Benitez, I think. I'm one of many Canadians who were wrongly let go 2 years ago. Many of us know. Yeah, so many people. Yep. 2 years ago, when the mandates were implemented, arbitration proceedings are happening now. Do you see a fair outcome given our corrupted courts? Do you see a fair outcome given our corrupted courts?
Okay, very interesting.
And I'd like to know.
I would like to know too. And I also had a question this week in one of my readings that was about this, about a person that was let go of 2 different jobs actually over the course of the whole thing. This woman was down in the States in upstate New York. But yeah, there was some information that came through from her guides. So I'm going to see if this corroborates that, because we're looking at an international phenomena. And what I feel excited about is we're looking at different successes and precedent setting cases in different parts of the world. So let's see. Oh, yeah, that's so sorry to hear that, Christian. I really feel compassion for you, because I can see, there's a lot of anxiety, and it's hard to not feel somehow personally responsible, even though we know this is so wrong, what's happening. It's hard not to go, how did I not see this? Or what could I have done differently? So there's like, the 9 of Swords is a lot about torturing yourself with what ifs, shoulda, woulda, couldas. And, it like somehow, because it's almost like there's a feeling with the 9 of Swords, like you've created this, or you didn't see it coming and you're upset with yourself. So it feels like one of the first things is to let yourself off that hook and go, something about all of what's happening is designed to send us in a new direction. And we each have different challenges in that personally, but we're all being guided. So when one door closes, it might be just a little peephole that opens initially, but you know what? It's going to get big. That little window is going to get big.
You know what comes up for me? The feeling of being discarded. Well, and if you've been discarded as children or in relationships, if you've been discarded, that pain of that coming back up in our narcissistic world.
Interesting. Both the things I just said are in this exact card, the World card. On the one hand, we're seeing this collaboratively all over the Western world. I talk to people in Australia, in Europe, in the UK, down in different parts of the States and Canada. And these cases are going on, and people are collectively, individually standing up for their rights. So you may feel alone, and like really, like you were just saying, Sue, you might feel like you've been discarded, and that you should have seen this coming somehow. But this is also part of, as Janine often says, rooting out the evil, right? This is part of like exposing what's going on and getting people to call out for, justice and freedom, fairness, all that kind of stuff. And what is going to be set in place as a result of this is going to be really valuable going forward from this point on. So I do see that it's going to have a positive outcome. Let's actually look at the exact cards related to it. Right. So 5 of Pentacles. Again, you could be looking at a longer wait, and into the fall and winter. It does feel important to go for, they're saying focus on winning the war, not the battle. So this is also about, somehow this little peephole that you're seeing, the possibility of change in the system. So was this the medical system, Sue?
Nope, not necessarily. No, okay. You don't know.
Well, seeing these changes starting really small and one little precedent setting case, but it just feels like it expands. It might take up to 2 years for that bigger, like global effect, which is going to have such, it's like the domino effect, right? Like once this starts coming down, it's going to just roll down all over the place. So there's something for Christian about, again, similar to the question about school and education, there's something about being shown another path, almost like a second career path. Yeah, that might actually, it doesn't necessarily replace this career choice. And it does feel like there will be a successful outcome, but it might be a little further ahead than what you're hoping for. But this is going to send you, this waiting time is going to send you, oh, look at the sovereignty card.
That's good. Yeah.
9 of Pentacles and 6 of Swords, moving out of troubled water towards even a better potential future. So
because it's happening for us, not to us. So it's almost a God shot, like they would say in AA, like that. It's like, well, here it is. Doesn't look good. Doesn't look good, but it is going to be good. So it's just having some faith with stepping forward.
Yeah. And I do feel like there's something, there's something about the stories we tell ourselves of shoulda, woulda, couldas. So that is that's almost the most challenging part of this, is to, it's like a type of grieving, right? It's like a being cast off, grieving that, and then having to try to make sense of that. Yeah. And they're saying, in the long run, this is going to make so much, those things where you go, oh man, this is terrible. Why is this happening to me? And then 5 years later, you look back and you go, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. Right. I mean, it's like, it's often the thing that feels so unfair is the thing that actually bumps us into a better track. So
doesn't feel like it at the time, but absolutely.
Totally.
So just visualizing maybe something coming up and looking at the opportunities coming in.
Yeah,
and taking the ones that present,
looking at the opportunities, looking for the longer win, winning the war. And it's not about losing the battle, but it's about maybe changing the battle strategy to include different responses, so you're going to keep pressure on the system. I'm not suggesting that you walk away and abandon that, but you're also going to open new doors of opportunity for yourself and move through the fear. Like a lot of this is about fear of finance, but join the club. We're all in this. Like, it doesn't matter how much you have, what kind of security you think you have. In fact, what I notice is the people that actually have a lot of security sometimes feel the most insecure. So
interesting.
It is.
Yeah, like it's almost like this holding. And we talked about that here. I'm in a very rich province. So we're like the little Texas of Canada, what they would consider Alberta. And it was like the people working in the oil and gas industry who made a lot of money were the ones that it was like they couldn't miss a beat. They couldn't miss a holiday. They couldn't let go of their truck. They couldn't let go of their things. And it was almost like, so most of them went in, and they weren't the ones anyways at the rallies. They weren't the ones that were, for the most part, that we could see, kind of this upper middle class that didn't want to let go of what they had.
Yeah. And so again, first of all, you're not being punished. Second of all, this is going to turn into something aligned with the greater good of all of us in the big picture of things. And you will have more sovereignty and prosperity and independence. It's just going to be going through these transitional phases. It's hard to predict timelines. I talked about that in my last soul sampler. If you didn't hear that, I gave a description of what timelines really are like for those of us that do this sort of divination and oracle work. And yeah, check that out. My last soul sampler, number 109.
Let's go to the learning, right, Ashala? Like, this is, I think, all for our learning. And then, I was wondering myself, coming up in sessions, that it's like if we were all just being palliated with, some money or a cushion or whatever, we might not be learning what we should need to be learning or came here to learn. Yes. And so I feel like this is the time, to get moving on that. And so what comes to mind, the meek shall inherit the earth, right? So is that what's happening? Like, will it switch to the point where if we've only been service to self, then there is going to be some hard lessons to learn there. And if we are turning into service for others, there's a biblical story that Jesus went to a woman's house and she said, I only have one piece of bread, but I'll offer it to you. That's all I have. And he said, you'll be blessed with abundance.
Isn't that powerful? I got the chills all over when you recount that story. And yeah, it's hard. We've become kind of soft and really abstract in our understanding of what really has value in this world.
Yeah.
And it is those simple practical things more than these big amounts of money in the bank and securities and property and pensions and all that kind of stuff. It's like that could be gone in a heartbeat, and it's really then about who you know, what you know,
right,
and who you are inside, like your faith, your connection to God, that He's not going to abandon you, So it's almost like, I feel like you said, what do you call it that they say in AA, the God shock?
Yeah.
It's a bit like we're being shocked into remembering what is really important, and also to strengthen our relationship with spirit, with God, with the Creator. That's a big part of what this is about. And I don't know about you, but my family and I, we were having a talk about this actually last night, and we were saying, how did we used to do all of these things different. Like we used to pray a lot more and have a lot more spiritual connected practice. And we just sort of got out of the habit, but then you get into the habit of watching a lot more media and being on your devices more. And it's like, okay, this is, definitely wake up time, everybody. Before we get so askew, really over the last decade, we were talking about how different we lived a decade ago. So we're all there's no shame in that. It's easy to get distracted into that abstract reality.
Yes. Edgar Casey talked about, he said that it's our indulgences and our comfort, our want and need for comfort that keeps us away from the Creator. So it's this constant indulging, and there's been so much just doled out to all of us, right?
Well, I do ancestral healing sessions with people. And in a session that I had the other day, someone's ancestor that had lived through the Irish famine, the famine in Ireland in the mid 1800s, they showed up and they said, we actually think you're more challenged than we were. And this ancestor said, the thing that's worse than not enough food is too much food.
Right. And malnutrition with too much food on top of it.
I was like, oh, that just struck on so many levels. It was because there's so much that we just get lost, almost like a gluttony kind of energy of consuming. You
can have what you want. You can do what you want.
And, what this ancestor said was that even when they were starving, they were still deeply connected to God. Deeply. Praying, and not just praying oh, help me, I'm a victim, thanking God for the little things they actually still had.
I love that.
Does that not just cast things in a real light?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like Viktor Frankl said, he saw a man give his last piece of bread to another man starving in the camps. And he said, that's how that's humanity. It's still alive no matter what.
Yeah.
So beautiful, right?
So we're getting, this is actually a gift. It's we can say, thank you, Spirit, for waking me up and reminding me, and not just me, because this is the other part. If it was just one of us, okay, that's great. But then you're kind of isolated. You're surrounded by consumers that are lost in virtual la la land and distracted and disconnected from God, disconnected from each other. Well, now we're all waking up.
Right.
So this is actually a good news story. It's actually a blessing in disguise.
Are we all waking up? Because I have a lot of questions, and I do see people's questions here.
Okay, let's look at that. And you also, your question was also around, are the meek inheriting the earth?
Yeah, so are the meek inheriting the earth? And so if we're still, because I know in the Dolores Cannon readings, and then also in some of my own work, it's almost like when the people are almost there and they're starting to serve, then there's a place to kind of support or lead or whatever, plant seeds. But the ones that are so steeped, they're so steeped in selfishness or negativity, or in the medical, I guess, prescription world, do they have the opportunity to turn around? So, and then it also brings up the biblical, and this is such a question for me, because it's like the biblical, don't cast pearls before swine.
Mhm.
So the ones that are just taking from you and depleting you, to make sure that you're cut off from that and moving to the other side. So I'm trying to understand, are we all in this together? And yes, in some ways, but in other ways, being discerning about who, and protecting your energy.
Okay, so this is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say, like, I'm going to say the cards, 8 of Pentacles here and the Magician as the answer. Are we all waking up, and are the meek inheriting the earth? The Magician is a great big yes. Like it's a card that has to do with like confidence and free will in action.
Yeah.
So, and then the 8 of Pentacles is the like hard working, like just tenacity, like work, like showing up every day and doing the work, regardless if you're seeing the results. Because a lot of times when we're skill building, you don't see good result right at the beginning. You have to get practice at it to get practice makes perfect, right?
Yes.
So it's that they're saying just show up and do the work, and see that your free will in action is making things move. We are going to need to go down further, not us that are working and enacting our free will. We just need to keep the nose to the grindstone and don't get distracted by other people losing it.
Right. And we can't carry those people. They're not victims. And I think that's the biggest mistake a lot of us, well, I'll speak for myself, that I've made, thinking I can run back and help them. And I was told in a session, as we move towards the new earth, there will be a time where there is no looking back. And if you run back for anyone, there will not be an opportunity perhaps for you either to move forward. Mm-hmm. And I thought that's really interesting, because we're getting into the victim, kind of hero complex, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that was the other thing. Remember, we had the idea, we wanted to talk about enmeshment a little bit today.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
A lot. And this is definitely a card related to enmeshment. You see how that person, 8 of Swords, is like basically tied up and restricted. They're literally kind of caught in a web of enmeshment that's all about what they think. It's all about like, interesting. This is about thinking you can control others, fix the outer world, like know the answer. And the more you think, the more you, and there's the 9 of Swords, which is the next step of where all that thinking goes, is you're into deep anxiety, overwhelm, like panic mentally.
Yes.
So they're saying, enact your free will, do the work, however that looks, which is just like what you would do regardless of what happens. It's almost like, I remember one of my spiritual teachers saying, if the world's coming to, he said, don't rush. If the world's going to end, why rush? And if it's not going to end, there's no reason to rush. So it's kind of like,
either way,
don't rush. Like, don't try to force things. Just keep doing what's right in front
of you. And
then
when you rush, you're out of natural rhythms and put your heart and body into unnatural rhythms as well.
And it does feel like, spirituality. And I want to say, like, coming back to a kind of religion and spirituality, especially the essence of some of the kind of purest essence of these spiritual teachings from long ago. This is going to really serve us. So prayer, community, communion, working together as a collective, like, and just doing the physical things, just literally keep doing the stuff. we're going to see a lot of emotion, big energy moving. And we can either go into feeling overwhelmed and panicked and like we're trying to control others. So in a reading I had this week, enmeshment came up as a topic. And what I was being shown is, you know how you want to try to help, especially your kids or your friends or your coworkers or whatever, and you're all up in their business, like trying to fix their lives.
Mm-hmm.
You're hanging open. Who's working on you when you're doing that? So
Right.
so then you leave your back open for someone else to come in and enmesh you. So when we enmesh in someone else, we leave our back open to be enmeshed ourselves. So they're saying, work here. You know, you can give suggestions and reflections and, you know, actual support, but it's not about trying to change that other.
Yes. Yeah. Like then we're like giving unsolicited advice and disrespecting free will.
Mm-hmm.
And not honoring the free will that we've been given. And I've also been told, or people have been told in sessions, is that don't get caught in the grief either. We're seeing so much grief. I just had a friend her husband was told he had 50-50 chance
to
live. And it's like holding like compassion and space, but then at the same time not getting pulled into the grief,
so
and getting enmeshed in it, because I think there's so much grief surfacing.
Actually, so my philosophy around grief that I learned from my spiritual mentor is you do want to dive deep into grief. However, you don't do it with the mind. You drop the mind at the door and you just feel feelings and let them move through you, and don't attach a story or a narrative or an agenda. See, because oftentimes grief puts us into anxiety because we're trying to solve something. But if we just let the feeling move through us, it actually cleanses us, and it cleanses everything.
So grieve hard. So it's grieving hard, and then also you feel, so then you can heal it.
Feel to heal.
All of the feelings are trapped in our body. So I know it just doing like teaching breath work, sometimes people just finally touch it. It's never been touched before. And then they just wail and was like, I was waiting to touch that for 20 years.
Yeah. So the wailing is not, it's the making a story. It's almost like an attachment to an agenda with grief. So pure grief is beautiful. It's therapeutic. It's so necessary. In fact, I feel like a lot of our issue is that we haven't been allowed to grieve properly in our culture. So we've got all this bottled up energy inside of us.
Remember that book you told me about? And it was like he had said, if your grandparents or parents never knew how to grieve, then it'll be passed on to you. Their grief will be passed on to you. So when you do that ancestral healing, I'm sure you see that. Like I had my grandmother had two brothers that lived and died in Siberian camps after the war. Yeah. And that's, all of that.
I mean, if it goes back for eons and eons, but even if you just look at the last few generations in the two world wars, like so much grieving. So, and then
men who came home from war, who drank, who didn't know how to.
Oh yeah. Because you were told there was no such thing as emotional support for PTSD. You were told suck it up, be a man, don't talk about it, don't think about it, just disassociate from it. Well, where does that go? It goes into, now you're going to pass that on to your kids.
Right. Yeah. And staying out of the body, disassociating and doing all of that, because the body doesn't feel safe then. That's so interesting looking at grief. I'd like to look more at that and wonder if there's more.
Let's have a look at some other questions.
Okay? So Democratic Party of Pennsylvania, state government really are they really controlled by the white hats? I'd like to know. People have been saying for a long time, white hats are in control. They're in control. And I was just going to say the Edgar Cayce readings, which has been coming up. about the dark and living and working with the dark and light. But Edgar Cayce says the dark will leave the planet forever at some time. And I've been hearing about that. So I know we're clearing it. So will that happen? And then again, back to the question, the Democratic Pennsylvania state, are they controlled by the white hats? So I'd like to just know generally who, like, so the Pennsylvania government, but also what about the world governments? White hats on top of things or not, or what?
Okay, this is interesting. What I'm being shown here is there's something very simplistic about this black-white thing. There's something very, like they're saying it's more colorful than black and white. So because this knight, the Knight of Wands is a very, well, first of all, it's a very strong card of, like, we call it the color card. It's around different ethnicities. It's around different languages. So it's a very, like, diverse. It's a card of a lot of diversity. And then the Five of Swords is defeat. It's mental defeat. It's almost like small-mindedness. The
Right.
answer is small-mindedness when the actual, we're so much more diverse. So what that's saying to me, I mean, it's about Pennsylvania in particular, but it feels like there's a much bigger story here. And it's almost like we're being given the very whitewashed version of what's going on. It's like a fairy tale for a child, that to try to explain it to you in a way that doesn't scare you is what I'm getting. So I'm seeing, they're showing me the good news is that there's a lot of integrity on the planet. Things are getting cleaned up, but it's not as we want these simple answers. Like, I feel like in a way, if we actually got told the real story, it would take literally days to unpack it. Like, they're saying it's super complex. There's a lot going on, and what we need to focus on is we're going the right direction. And like, it's almost like there's so many different power plays, because this is a power card in the past, but
Right.
there's a liberation card in the present, and faith. The Fool is faith.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the future is have faith, not in the black and white story version of is it this or isn't it that,
Yeah.
but in that we're going in a good direction. You can feel it. Tune into that. Tune into the feeling. It's almost like saying, okay, I know it's way more complicated than I can understand. Just like when we talk about off-world, when we talk about interdimensions and spiritual, collective and the universe, we all get it. We're all like, okay, that's a lot more. I can't quite comprehend that. Like, it's a big thing, right? But at the same time, it's like we can feel it. It feels, when you think and tune in to the energy of loving consciousness in the universe, you can feel it. You can
Well, and
feel
that would be the way to the new earth. I would think it's like imagining the best case scenario, seeing what it is, and so still like grounded in reality, but at the same time, envisioning and working towards something better.
So I get that there's some other there's that black and white, the two sphinxes, the chariot. So there's a third thing. It's not a white hat and it's not a black hat.
Yeah.
It's not a gray hat. But it is a third thing.
Yeah.
There's more dynamic
Yeah.
in this than what we're aware of. But what I love is there's something very feminine going on. So we're seeing, and I don't just mean like women, although we could be looking at a big shift where a lot more real, actual women are coming into the forefront in politics and leadership, but like literally almost as we transition out of the old political regimes, a lot of the direction is going to be guided by women. So there's something about that too. Like, I don't know what's going on in Pennsylvania, but they're saying keep a watch, keep an eye on women in the arena there.
Bringing in more compassion, more community, more connection. Is that?
I mean, it's not again, I'm not a black and white definitive, like a woman is a better leader en masse as a general rule, but it is that we have seen such a dearth, such a small ratio of women, that of real, actually, women who behave like women in the political arena. So this is coming. And Pennsylvania, you may have some very powerful female energy on its way into your political arena there. So keep posted on that, and maybe give us a comment about that if you know about something related to that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Okay, so Garden Hoe, did you want to move on?
Yes, please.
The Wicked Witch of the West, Bonnie, still demanding mandates. So this is in British Columbia, Canada. Still demanding mandates for healthcare workers here in BC. Yeah, I just spent my morning in the hospital here, and it's interesting. See that being lifted anytime soon. We're losing good people, and they are leaving the province.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting, right? It's like what I've been getting about BC, and I mean, I live here, so I can tell you just as well as anyone, front row seat here to the craziness. And there is something about, like, I'm hearing the word being on display. Like, there's something about being the ones that are holding that perspective that creates the contrast, so that people, like, it's the usual, like, so people get it, just how, especially in comparison, because we're doing a lot of, a country like Canada, we're a huge country, we've got all these provinces, there's always been this massive, like, debate between the East and the West, like,
yes.
So we're, even in Canada, we're seeing all this strategic maneuvering, posturing between different political parties and different agendas. So I feel like this is part of heating that up to a point where things are going to start, like, being transformed on a deeper level. So let's look.
BC is more liberal, and it's more woke, right?
Definitely.
So, right. So you'll see a lot more of
so
that sort of thing. Yeah. So
what I want to say, we've got these 2 4s, so 9 of Wands, another 9, which is coming to the end of something, 90% of the way through this unfortunate, challenging situation.
Yeah.
Maybe another 4 months, because we've got the 4 of Wands and the 4 of Cups.
So in 4 months, would you say more of the whole agenda is going to be okay?
Well, yeah, because we're also, like, something as a result of this, there's also a shift in compliance, is what I'm hearing. So we're going to have 40. So we're only, according to my cards, they're telling us there's 90% compliance. This is the thing that I've been really up on in the last year or so, is the stats that we're getting are not accurate. So I'm getting, there's only 40% compliance. So
has there been a number that's been accurate since the beginning of this? Because everything's been.
I don't know about that, Sue. I wouldn't want to speculate without asking the cards about that.
But how many beds were full in the ICU? How many, everything was based on numbers, and it was like, where are they getting these numbers?
Yeah. So what I get is that it's going to become less. So the decrease in compliance is going to create an opportunity for a new kind of collaboration. So because people are at a point, thankfully, mentally, and in their strategic thinking and their critical thought, to realize there's bigger fish to fry, because we have, you know, basically, like you say, we have ICU situations where people are dying in emergency rooms. There's like, we see that just such a breakdown in the medical system. So it's almost like this compliance, even over this next 2 or 3 weeks, is what I'm hearing. Like, it's going to just continue to go down, down, down. So it might start at 40%, and then it's down to 30%, and it's going down, down, down. And they're realizing they've got to stop that, because people are just not. It's not that they're not buying
it again. They're not going to have the buy-in again, right? Maybe the first time, but not again.
Well, and they're not, you know, whether they're buying the whole, you know, C story and the this thing or whatever, like where people are at with that, whether they believe that's still valid or necessary or whatever, they're not buying the, like, everybody has to comply, and we're going into such deficit economically and in the medical system. So people are saying, you know what, like, I still believe in this. I still believe I'm going to get my, you know what, and blah, 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 and wear my, you know what, and all that stuff. But they're going, you know, we need nurses and doctors. We, like, forget it. If they don't want to, who cares? Like, we got bigger issues here. So people are going to start looking away from being pushed into, you know, because of the fear of this illness taking over the world. People are going, there's actually something bigger to be afraid of now. That the shift of compliance, it's almost like we don't need to bother, you know, getting into big debates about, is this valid, and is the, you know, is the big illness real, and all that. Like, forget about that. Just focus on, how do these policies serve the medical system going forward? You know, how do these policies of excluding people that are so needed, like, we need qualified people. And, you know, like, I think people are getting enough, even if they don't realize it, somewhere in the back of their brain, which most of us have already had the experience, something's going, this is fishy. I can't get behind this to that degree anymore.
Maybe that's the grand plan of the universe. In a way, the divine plan is like, when are we going to say no? When is humanity going to say enough? We've had enough of this.
Yeah. And they're going to start by going along, some of them, but they're going to start saying no to making it mandatory for everyone.
Right.
And that, like, please don't see that. The guides are saying, everybody take a deep breath. All of us right now, take a deep breath and go, thank you. That is a win. That's a win.
That's actually huge. Yep.
That is, like, I got chills all over my body. They're saying, you won. If they say, if those people that are wearing this and getting that, don't be mad at them. Just let them be. If they say, you know what, I defend my right to continue doing this, right?
Yeah, by all means. Yeah.
If they say, I can't get behind saying that this is mandatory for everyone anymore, we won. That's it. Like, hallelujah.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's always been the insanity of it, right? Like, where could we ever get to this place where you could assume that everyone needed to comply in order for some people to be protected? So that is where we're going to get, people are going, no way to that anymore. Nice. Because the proof has been, guess what? So many people did, and lots of people still got sick.
Yes. And it didn't end.
And it didn't end.
More and more, it just didn't end, right? So they kept on the carrot stick.
The curve didn't flatten.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So this is going to be we're going to see this. I would say within 6 months, this whole thing is turned around. You know what? And don't be despairing, everybody. I often feel sad for, you know, my truther friends that get really upset when they see someone on a bus wearing a, you know what, across their face. And it's like, I don't know. It's kind of, I mean, it's almost like to let that alone and not let that upset you, that somehow it feels like it's important for us to not focus on that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just to leave that be and chalk it up to, it's part of free will in the universe. And we don't want to challenge free will to the point where we're making our own mandates and saying everybody has to comply with our version of reality, right? Like, we're playing that same game.
And people are afraid. Sometimes I wonder if they were people who died in plagues. I mean, they're terrified. They are terrified, and they were already hijacked. We've all been groomed. And then you spoke about contracts, like, did they have contracts to do this? They're also intelligent people. And I don't care for the sleeper or the people talking about sleepers. I was told in a dream, it was like, who are you to call other people, someone else a sleeper? Call them anything. They're God's children as much as we are. We're children of the universe or whatever it is. And they're frightened. And I know what I did when I was afraid, when my children were babies and kind of got pushed into something I didn't believe in terms of, these things for babies. Right. And so I didn't want to listen, and I was afraid. I was afraid of the consequences. I was pushed by other people. So I always think too, I mean, we kind of also brought our babies to these people, not alone. And then I see these are adults and we're learning lessons. So that's that, right?
Yes.
Like, perhaps.
And I mean, that, of course, that's always the hardest part, is to watch people lining their children up.
Oh. Yeah.
So, we're definitely not out of that woods yet, but I feel like they're saying to not underestimate the power of that win, which is the decision, the declaration, the necessity of a declaration that says people have freedom of sovereign choice around these medical issues. That is
now we can talk about it. We can actually talk about the interventions for babies for birthing mothers, all of that. We can have that discussion where I'll tell you what, 20 years ago, there was no way you could even bring it up without anger and massive pushback. And now we can. So in another way, I mean, that was a beautiful segue to that. So
yeah, definitely. Amazing.
Okay, I want to know, is evil leaving the planet or what?
Okay, so I would love to answer, but I'm at 11:57 here, and I have a reading in just a few minutes. So I gotta sign off for today, but we will just remind people to come on a little early if you want a question. I'm looking at them at the beginning of the session, and we're trying to get those first couple of questions in for sure. And it's been so amazing. Thank you so much, Sue.
Thank you so much, Ashala. There is one question. Do you want me to hold it for next time, or do you just want to pull one quick card, or I'll make sure to get it down?
Yeah, let's hold it for next time.
No problem.
Yeah, we'll hold it for next time, because I don't want to rush through it.
Write it down. You
totally betcha. Awesome. Blessings to you all. Have a beautiful week, everyone. And I'll just close this down. Sue, you can stay on. I'll just end the stream.
Okay. Much love, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.